Farley, Chair, and welcome to the Metropolitan Council meeting on this Wednesday, July 27th. We were stalling a little bit to establish a quorum, which really worked, and now we're able to start our business. First off, we have a view of the agenda, which was sent out and posted. If there's any changes or additions or comments, hearing none, we can move on to the minutes from July 13th. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Bento.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Barber. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. At this point, we have an opportunity for the public who wish to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. This is the time, and this is when I always look to Liz. Has anybody signed up?
No.
No. So there is no public comment today. We move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carried. On to the standing committees. And the community development has reports on the consent agenda, which brings us to the Environment Committee, which I believe will be facilitated by Councilmember Bento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. Before us today, we're considering the MCES wastewater rates and charges for 2023. This is business item 2022-201, and staff presented the preliminary 2023 budget and rates to the Environment Committee back in May. We then had 2 customer webinars in May and June where we had 74 participants attending from 50 communities in the region. The proposed revenue increase for the regional wastewater charge in 2023 is a 5.5% increase over 2022. Of course, it will vary from city to city depending on their flow. This rate increase is being primarily driven by increases in chemicals, utilities, and labor. Details are provided in the business item. The increase and the other rate changes comply with our council policies and should enable environmental services to meet our wastewater regulatory requirements, implement the infrastructure rehabilitation and maintenance needed, and provide wastewater capacity for our region's growth. In addition, these proposed charges and rates are based on our cost of service methodology per our council policy. These wastewater rates need to be set well in advance because our city customers set their own budgets and their own rates in the months ahead. Therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the Met Council adopt the wastewater rates and charges to be effective January 1st, 2023, as outlined on page 1 of the business item.
Thank you, Councilmember Bento. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Chance. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That motion carried.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I could just add, in my explanation, I made remarks to the public meeting, there are the 2 meetings that were held in May and June. The MCES staff do a phenomenal job of meeting with the cities to review the whole process. I've participated in those every year since the first year. Remember the first year going in person. But they are just excellent, and it gives the cities an opportunity to connect with people, to hear a really understandable explanation of why the rates are what they are, how they're set. It also provides national information and shows how we as a region are very, very competitive and affordable compared to a lot of other regions in the country. And I think I don't know about you guys, but one of the first things I thought of when I heard about the horrible flooding in St. Louis was, oh my God, waste treatment. I mean, I just can't imagine what it's like for that region right now. So we're really, really blessed to have the MCES staff we have and for the thoroughness with which they engage with our communities. So I want to thank them for that.
Thank you, Councilmember Vento, for saying that, and I agree. I've participated in those briefings, and I've learned a lot. So I don't know if Ned Smith's in the room, but anyway, it was. Of course. Well, learning again. All right, great, thanks. But extend our appreciation.
Well, one more thing. I won't do it tonight. I'll let either Councilmember Lindstrom or Lisa or Ned do this at a future meeting, but they'll be coming back with some exciting news. That's all I'll say, just a teaser.
Hey,
Nail biter.
so make the minutes reflect, there's a teaser.
Yeah.
Out there. All right, on to the Management Committee. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
That's
don't
a
know if
tough
I
act
can
to
top
follow.
that. I know I'm nervous now, but there's some good news in this report as well. I'm pleased to bring forward to you 2022-194. It's a same week item. We just had this at the Management Committee meeting today, and it is regarding council property insurance renewal for the upcoming year. Business item 2022-184 seeks council authorization to bind coverage of its property insurance effective 8/1/2022 to 8/1/2023 in an amount not to exceed $3,660,000. This insurance, which has been with AXA XL for the past 4 years, provides coverage to damaged physical property, as well as for expenses incurred to continue operations after a loss. For this year's renewal, the staff worked with the council's insurance broker and fully marketed the program to several insurance companies. Based on this marketing effort, it was determined that 2 companies, AXA XL and FM Global, could lead the council's property program. While both provided the appropriate coverage, FM Global's quote was the most cost-effective. I also just want to add that during our meeting ahead of this, Phil Waljasper is here and did a great job doing that, but we'll be moving from a $100,000 deductible per year to $1 million deductible, but we will also experience great cost savings that will be actualized within a year. So I just wanted to put that out there, that was part of the changes being made, and we talked a bit about that at our Management Committee meeting. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move that the Metropolitan Council authorize binding coverage of its property insurance effective 8/1/2022 to 8/1/2023 in amount not to exceed $3,660,000, and again, that is with FM Global.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Lilligan. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carried. On to the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, council members, business item number 2022-181 is regarding the award of an engineering and construction administration contract for the Metro E-Line BRT project. The Metro E-Line will stop at 34 locations along a 13.3-mile corridor following France Avenue, Hennepin Avenue, 4th Street, and University Avenue from Southdale Transit Center in Edina to the Metro Green Line Westgate Station in Minneapolis. Metro Transit requires a consultant to provide engineering and construction administration services for the E-Line. A request for proposals was issued in February. There were 21 registered plan holders, including 17 consultants, 2 subcontractors, 2 plan rooms, and 8 plan holders identified as minority women, small, veteran, or disadvantaged business enterprises. The council ultimately received 3 proposals. In accordance with the Brook Act procurement process, the evaluation panel ranked and selected HDR as the most technically qualified proposer. Following evaluation, the negotiation panel opened the price proposal and conducted negotiations. The panel agreed that the final prices are fair and reasonable. The Office of OEO set a DBE goal of 18%. OEO determined that the proposals from HDR has met the DBE requirements of this contract. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 21P364 with HDR Incorporated for design, engineering, and construction administration for the Metro E-Line project in the amount not to exceed $10,741,845.
Thank you, Councilmember Barber. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carried. On to our one information item. We are going to hear from Katie Roth on the arterial bus transit update. It seems like we have considered many routes and funding and planning, and now we really are, as they say, into it. So it's really exciting day to hear from you. It's not just one line, several. So welcome, Katie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, council members. I'm Katie Roth. I'm the Director of Arterial Bus Rapid Transit. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. There has been quite a lot of business related to Arterial BRT recently before the council, but I haven't had the opportunity to provide an update about the program overall in quite some time. I last shared an update with the Transportation Committee in June of last year, but this is a great opportunity to be before the full council, so thank you. I think folks are familiar as we've been reviewing ridership across the last several years and understanding what's happened since we've implemented BRT in the system, that it's truly one of the brighter spots in our transit network today. And my presentation is going to focus on how we're building out this network of fast and frequent lines truly for a stronger network and a stronger future in our transit system. When the A line and C line first launched, we saw immediate and significant increases in ridership, upwards of 30% on each corridor over those routes that they substantially replaced. And across the pandemic, we've seen the BRT mode retain more ridership and stay closer to those pre-pandemic levels of ridership than any other Metro Transit service. And overall ridership has continued to climb back across our system, led by the A line and C line, and also by those core bus routes that represent the places where arterial BRT investment is planned. So by 2030, our plans envision a network of 8 arterial BRT lines shown as the either solid for existing or dashed for planned darker gray lines on this map. And as you can see, they form that connective tissue across the region between the rest of the metro network of light rail and then our guideway bus rapid transit investments. Building out the D through H lines, including the B line, as we recall, that comes after the D line in our alphabet. It represents roughly $500 million in investment in fast and frequent transit that will significantly enhance access to opportunity in the region. It's also a very significant investment in equity. By 2030, these 8 lines alone will serve 45% of renters in the 7-county region, 45% of zero-car households in the region, 32% of the region's BIPOC residents, and will provide access to 1/3 of all of the jobs in the region. So I'll walk through the status of each of the projects in development today, starting with the D line, which is planned to open in just 129 days. I hope all of your calendars are marked, on December 3rd of 2022. We are progressing very well on schedule through construction activities after a very efficient 2021 construction season that left just 5 stations to be substantially built this year. Those are shown on this map in the yellow and are highlighted here. And as of today, frankly, the majority of the work has been completed in terms of heavy construction at most of these locations as well. Our very last station to be built this year will be at 7th Street and 5th Avenue, just down the street from Metro Transit's Haywood facility, where we're closely coordinating with construction on the Metro Green Line extension. Also, as of a week ago, but these numbers are still correct per staff today, 49 out of 59 shelters have been installed. 32 of the 61 pylons on the project have been installed. All of the other pieces have been delivered to our contractor, are in the shop getting outfitted, and will be put up over the next couple of months. And all 26 of the buses we need to operate service have been delivered as well. So I'll go through a couple of construction images on the next few slides. This first one here is from earlier this year, showing the northbound station on Emerson at West Broadway Avenue in North Minneapolis. Major construction here, so the installation of all the concrete essentially and everything below ground was completed in 2021. So really early in the construction season this year, our contractors were able to get out and start installing the shelters. This photo shows a crew from Bald Eagle Erectors, who is a DBE subcontractor working for Thomas & Sons on the D-line, installing the shelter structure in March. Also from this spring, this next photo shows another subcontractor, Premier Electrical Corporation, installing the knee wall, the concrete knee wall that forms the back of the This is actually the southbound, not northbound as is noted here, platform at Chicago and 42nd Street in South Minneapolis. This is one of the first sites to see construction activities this spring. And I'll just note briefly that a knee wall like this provides some separation between the sidewalk and then the properties behind and then the platform. And it's really an important design feature as we're fitting these stations into very constrained urban spaces, trying to meet ADA requirements and drainage requirements while also making those fit into the existing built environment. This is a more recent photo just from earlier this month at Chicago and 26th Street with freshly poured platform in the concrete banding pattern shown there, as well as the 9-inch curb and the tactile or raised boarding strip that runs along the length of that curb. And then very recently, this is increasingly what a lot of our stations are starting to look like. This is at Chicago and 48th Street, the northbound platform. But you'll see this up and down the corridor where the shelter and the pylon have been installed, and then the site is protected by fences or gates while a lot of work continues at each of these sites. One of the things you can barely see here because there's some glare and I can tell, but the glass has been installed on the shelter too. And one of the things that's different from the A-line and the C-line is that we have clear glass on the D-line shelters. We worked with facilities maintenance staff to make this switch for the D-line and moving forward, in part because it is more efficient, it's cheaper, and it's easier to source that clear glass than it is to have the patterned glass that's on our other shelters, but also because it has safety and security benefits and makes it critical in places like this, easier to see some of the storefronts around and behind these shelters in these urban areas. So as we look at this next photo, you can't tell, there's no glass in this one, but they look pretty much the same at this point. This is up on the north side at Fremont and 42nd. Work is continuing. As I mentioned, a lot of shelters look like this up and down the corridor. And we are getting, as we do at most points in these projects, we get questions about, well, when are these shelters going to be operational? When can customers start to use these? They're starting to look more and more like they are completed structures, but there is quite a bit of work still ongoing between now and our substantial completion date in November. So those shelters and pylons need to be installed up and down the corridor. In some places, we have railings that protect the back of the edge and back of the edge of the platform and keep people from tripping over a stair. There are electrical connections that are in the process of being made for the shelter and platform lighting, for the heaters and all of the equipment to be installed in the stations. Also, our fiber optic network that's run up and down the corridor, we're completing the connections for that so that then our crews can install the emergency telephones, the security cameras, the next strip signs, all of the customer-facing infrastructure. And Metro Transit staff can install the fare collection equipment that's on each of these platforms for people to pay before they board. Finally, a really important step is that our contractor needs to complete the work, and then our staff need to certify that it's been done per our safety certifications. Once that's happened, we'll be able to open these to customers. So I'll also note that there are a couple of places where the D-line will continue to see construction activities after we open the line for service later this year. Those are called out on this map here, and the one that's mentioned in the middle here with the map is that at Portland and 38th Street, we're going to be building temporary stations this fall to support D-line operations when that line begins service in December. As many of you probably know, the city of Minneapolis is leading a community engagement effort to envision the future for the intersection of 38th and Chicago and George Floyd Square. As that is planned to progress with a construction project in the future, we know that the D-line will be detoured from that at some point, also when construction activities occur. So this temporary station will support operations now and in the future prior to a permanent station for the D-line, being built in coordination with the city's overall schedule and their future construction effort. Future stations are also going to be built at Osseo Road, which is up in the north part of the corridor near the Brooklyn Center Minneapolis border, and then down in Richfield at roughly 494 in Portland as part of other projects led by Hennepin County and MnDOT. So lots to come on the D-line, but we are very excited for opening day. Lots of work yet to come, and we look forward to opening that to customers. The B-line is the next project in development. As noted here, this is replacing and upgrading Route 21, which is Metro Transit's second highest ridership bus route. We know that there are many, many people who live within a 10-minute walk or roll of this corridor, of whom nearly half are BIPOC residents. This corridor, right now, we're in the design stage with construction planned to start in 2023 and service scheduled to begin in late 2024. And of course, this project was fully funded as of October 2020 when the state bonds were provided to fully fund the budget on this project. So one of the key activities that I'll share today that we've been working on across 2022 in close coordination with Minneapolis and Hennepin County in particular, as they look at developing plans for broader improvements to Lake Street that could be done in concert with the B-line construction, is to take a look at our construction phasing plan approach. And in this case, what we're planning to do is break the project essentially into two pieces and commence the east construction shown in pink here in the spring of 2023, so just right around the corner here. And once those stations are done, we plan to open those for customers. We then construct in a second phase all of the stations west of Hiawatha Avenue in the city of Minneapolis in coordination with other improvements that Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis are planning. That would allow for Route 21 customers to benefit from a lot of these improvements that we're going to make in the nearer term, while still allowing some time for that coordination to take place on the west half of the corridor, bringing it all together by opening day in late 2024. I'll note also that the B-line in downtown St. Paul here will serve stations that will be built as part of the Gold Line project along 5th and 6th Streets. So where we are in the process right now, in addition to developing the design and finalizing our construction plans, is seeking feedback on the level of detail that we've developed in those plans. We're currently in an active comment period just through the end of this week here, July 29th, following a live virtual open house we held earlier this month and more notifications to station neighbors on the corridor, businesses and residents, to really seek feedback on specifically where the infrastructure items are sited in these stations and how that layout fits into the street, to see if there are places where maybe shifting the station 5 to 10 feet could make a big difference for an adjacent property owner or a resident or a business. So those are the types of feedback we're seeking right now, and we'll be feeding that back into our design development toward the end of this year, and ending up with construction-ready plans for the east portion of the B-line at the end of 2022. So I'll just note here, this is another example of the kind of information we're sharing when we're communicating about the progress of this corridor right now. This is a rendering of the eastbound Lake and Lyndale station, key connection to Route 4 along Lyndale Avenue. And we're getting feedback on what the fit of these stations is into the corridor and feeding that back into plans. Next up is the E-line, and I won't spend too much time on this corridor as it has been the subject of recent business before the council. But this, of course, is the upgrade to Route 6 from the U of M to Southdale, planned for construction to start in 2024 and for the line to begin service in 2025. As we are moving forward, there's been a lot of activity. Most recently, in June, the approval of the corridor plans setting the station locations, and then just a few minutes ago, of course, the award of the Engineering and Construction Administration contract on this corridor. So our next step here is in the next couple of weeks to get underway with design initiation. And as we do that, we're going to continue quite a bit of coordination with the cities of Edina and Minneapolis and with Hennepin County and MnDOT, just on our project, as well as with other infrastructure projects that they have planned in this corridor. There's quite a bit happening along this corridor. And some of that includes places where we've identified priorities for bus-only lanes that would benefit the E-line, and our county and city partners are considering those as they advance street reconstructions or other projects on their county and city roads. So we're eager to get into engineering on this project with today's action toward construction-ready plans by the end of 2023.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
If I could just on this, I want to thank Katie. I just want to let everybody know I couldn't be at the June meeting when this was approved, and I would have fully supported it for sure. My dog had to have surgery that day, and trying to get an appointment with your veterinarian has been a little challenging lately. So I appreciate all the work you've done on this, Katie. In full disclosure, I used to work as the executive director at the 50th and France Business Association. I was actually employed by the Musicant Group, so not directly by the association. But I became really engaged in this project and had to wear my hats very carefully and would have recused myself at the time had this come before me while I was still in that capacity, but I'm no longer in that capacity. I really want to thank staff too, because the business community there, the 50th and France Business Association, that represents over 100 businesses at that intersection in that district, really became very engaged, and we had staff out on site, and a lot of communications was taking place. The stations are proposed to be at the intersection of 50th and France. If any of you have been out there, it's a very busy intersection. You've done great work, of course, with all the traffic studies. But with that information coming forward, the 50th and France Business Association then subsequently, upon my departure, communicated in through the Transportation Committee and staff that they are really hoping that that location can be reconsidered and moved to 51st, where it is less congested. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that I think make a good business case. But I especially want to thank Katie, council members Barber, Pacheco, Cummings, and myself were invited on July 19th, kind of a site walk. I think there was really good information provided by Met Council staff on, the analysis. But at the same time, there were property owners, investors. Pete Dienovic with Buell Investors was out there. The mayor was out there. Bill Neuendorf from the city was out there. And I know the city has expressed to me that they are really fully supportive of BRT. Mayor Hovland, of course, is chair of the Transportation Advisory Board. And really know that the Met Council staff, Katie and her team, have been working with the City of Edina's team, so there's no gaps in any of that. But the City of Edina has officially approved a resolution that was included in the information, and they are fully supporting having that location be moved to 51st. So I just want that on the record. I would have said that at the meeting in June, but I couldn't. But certainly, council members have been informed, but just wanting to make sure that the full council is aware of that. The city does believe that it is essential that the details of the service be carefully woven into the existing conditions and context. The city is in the process right now of hiring a traffic consultant to explore the downstream traffic impacts if the station is located at 50th versus 51st. That was discussed at our on-site meeting, so no surprise there. They are hoping that the matter can get resolved in the upcoming months and welcome an opportunity to continue to speak with the full council on this. So I just wanted everybody to know this is a great project, and this business association is fully behind it. They value transit there, but there is just this desire to move it a block south for the reasons that they've stated in the process. So I just wanted to let all of you know that, with all full respect to the process and everybody who's been involved. But you'll probably be hearing from the City of Edina more on this, and I know Katie has, of course, promised to continue to work with the City of Edina, and that's certainly the Business Association, as they're fully invested in a vibrant business district and bringing people into through transit, both workers and shoppers, and also making sure that they're fully engaged in the process, even though this project has been approved, and we've approved the contract too on this. So I just wanted to get that in on the record because I wasn't able to a month ago. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other comments at this point? All right. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to actually, as I referred to myself at the last meeting discussing this and feeling like Johnny come lately on this project often, I've experienced great support from staff, and as I'm getting regular questions on the 43rd in Upton, I live on 39th in Upton, so I walk by it quite a bit. And the neighborhood has kind of split on a lot of the discussions, even on the community meetings that were held. And the last meeting we had, and we discussed some of the neighbors, they raised some issues of accessibility and medical issues there, but that again had been addressed before, and I was reminded of that and given the information. And as of last week, I'm in neighborhood as the person to call. So the website, so I had some
Welcome
information.
to the council.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And so, but it's actually been a great experience. Not everyone's always pleased with everything, but the ability to engage is the most important part to this this approval process. And I know this was approved, but my sense is we'll continue to be discussing this. And I have met with Councilmember Padasano and again, the neighborhood groups, and I think they'll be very active even in our design level. So all is not lost. If you're looking at an approval up and down, I think there's ways that we can really make this thing accessible and meet the issues of the neighborhood, which are quite, even in the communication I get, we're 50-50 about. So I want to thank the staff and make clear that people watching and people from the neighborhood know that we've discussed this and we continue to discuss it, and I appreciate their involvement as well.
Thank you for those comments, and I'd actually, just as a context, say that, and Katie is very humble, but really responsive to neighbors and adjacent properties where there are, concerns and enthusiasm. And these are, lifelong infrastructure investments, and we're going to have areas where deep engagement and a lot of opinions are expressed. So I think having that level of professional responsiveness is really good. I know that Tour and Edina, as Councilmember Johnson described, I've been on several meetings with Katie and others related to the B line and a couple on the other areas on the E line. I mean, we just know that that's part of the process. And so this isn't something you haven't been experiencing. Yeah, Molly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll just throw in my 2 cents worth as well. I think that in integrating a new line or expanding a line or whatever we are doing with our transit system to make it even more robust than it is to serve those that most need it is always a challenge. And we're not just doing it Metro Transit, but we're doing it with counties, with MnDOT, with cities, and the extreme involvement of staff in getting all kinds of opinions expressed to make this the best that it can be. We've certainly seen through the pandemic how critical our transit system is to many people. And I was over on 50th and France also, and I think that certainly there are other interests and other opinions, and anything that we do is going to not please everyone. I think that there were compelling reasons to have the stations at 50th and France. I think that you, the staff, engineering, have gone out of your way to make sure that everything is considered and have pledged to continue to engage as this unfolds, to address all of the concerns that they have. Everything is not going to be to their satisfaction or anything else that we do. And this isn't just on 50th and France. I mean, we've had lots of issues on lots of routes, and we're not going to please everyone all of the time. But I have total faith in the studies that were done, in the parking studies, in the all of the transportation studies that have been done and that have been used in planning this route. And it's a hard one, but I think that the work that you are doing and the work that staff is doing to expand the system in the best way possible to serve the most people is to be admired, and I thank you for that. And I realize that I think that this is the best alternative for what we're considering to serve the most people. There are lots of considerations for why a station is placed on a particular corner rather than 1 block away. And yes, there are arguments for both, but I think in this case that Councilmember Johnson has brought up, that to serve the most in the most efficient manner, leaving it at 50th is the correct decision, and working with the city continually to try to tweak it as much as can be done to address the concerns in that area. But I appreciate the work that you are doing, and yes, I acknowledge the challenges that the city has, but I thank you for all of your outreach and engagement and look forward to this line. It's very exciting. And that's all I have to say.
Katie,
All right.
back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and council members. And I appreciate the words of appreciation for the process that our team has led. I just wish that the other 9 members of my team were here to hear that. I will definitely pass that on to them, in addition to all of the community outreach staff at Metro Transit and the council staff who make it possible to have robust processes with each of these projects as we move them forward. So thank you. So as we then round out the alphabet with the F, G, and H lines, this will be a little bit more of an introduction. We haven't really brought forward a lot of work on these corridors thus far, but the F line was, of course, named by the council as part of the conclusion of the Network Next study in early 2021 as the Central Avenue corridor from Northtown Mall up in Blaine down to downtown Minneapolis. This is a corridor now that we've been advancing planning on across the latter part of 2021 and into 2022, and we anticipate that this fall, in October, we'd be at a point to release a draft corridor plan with those initial station locations for public comment. That would set us up to advancing this corridor for construction in 2025 and service starting in 2026, pending full funding, of course. As we've been putting together those planning recommendations and getting ready for more public feedback, we've been doing that in very close coordination with our city partners, with our county partners, and with MnDOT, who have been sitting on a technical advisory committee since January on this project. Another big milestone on the F line is that this is the first arterial BRT project for which Metro Transit is pursuing FTA's Capital Investment Grant, or CIG, funding as a small starts project. This was made possible in this project by early investment by the state in 2021, committing a local match source that hasn't previously been available to ABRT projects. And so with that, we made the determination to seek to enter the program and submitted a formal request to FTA in May, and were formally approved to enter the project development phase on May 3rd of this year. So this is really exciting. As part of this work, we're also refining the cost estimate on the project in advance of submitting preliminary information for a project rating from FTA later this year. We expect that the F line is going to be a very competitive project, and pursuing small starts funding on this line allows for the state investment in the Arterial BRT program to really go further in advancing future lines. And is another way that we can continue to leverage the additional investment that we've seen in these lines toward building out that network. So I'll note that as we move on down the alphabet, we're also beginning planning this year on the G line, the Rice-Robert corridor, serving Little Canada, St. Paul, and West St. Paul. This line's planned for construction in 2026 and service to begin in 2027. So one of our first activities is beginning to seek the funding for the approximately $78 million project budget. A major source of these funds is anticipated to be the regional solicitation, similar to, in the past solicitation, how the F line was a recipient of $25 million through the TAB process. So we submitted a formal request that the G line be the project we are putting forward in the arterial bus rapid transit category of this year's regional solicitation. We're also very closely engaged with our agency partners to coordinate G-line planning with several street reconstruction projects. There's definitely a theme here as we talk about building out this network, including a re-envisioning of Rice Street, as well as a reconstruction of Robert Street, just outside here in downtown St. Paul. Finally, to round out the alphabet, I'll introduce the H line, which will run along the Route 3 corridor on Como and Maryland Avenues from downtown Minneapolis all the way out to the Sunray Transit Center on the east side of St. Paul. This line is really critical in that it connects nearly every other line in the existing and planned metro network. So it's one of those crosstown connectors similar to the B line that makes possible a lot more network connections than the maybe more traditional radial structure that we see in a lot of networks. This line is planned to be a roughly $105 million project budget, maybe another corridor that we consider seeking federal funding for. And in the meantime, we're advancing, usually, as we do here, with coordination with our partners and planning to get into the planning process starting next year with construction planned for 2027. My very last update today, as we advance these future transitways, we're also revisiting planning decisions on the C line in light of recent developments on the Blue Line extension light rail routing. So in November of 2016, the council approved a recommendation to move the C line from Olson Highway to Glenwood Avenue once Metro Blue Line extension light rail was in service. The recommendation was based on a process that considered, in large part, the desire to balance two transitway investments across multiple corridors rather than concentrate both LRT and BRT in the same corridor. At the time, the council directed staff to begin developing that Glenwood alignment once the full funding grant agreement for the Blue Line extension was in place. Of course, much has happened in this corridor since 2016. Most recently, in June of this year, the council and Hennepin County Board voted, of course, to approve a new route for the Blue Line extension that would not use Olson Highway. So as a result, we plan to advance a recommendation to council later this year to recognize that alignment and to instead develop permanent stations along Olson Highway. This would then allow Metro Transit to work closely with MnDOT as they consider future changes to the Olson Highway corridor and plan for those stations to be upgraded and made permanent in coordination with a future project there. So with that, I will round out my update and answer any other questions.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much a question, but I'm really glad we could have this for the full council tonight. We hear a lot about this at Transportation Committee, and we get enmeshed in the details sometimes, so it's very nice that all of you could hear all the things that are going on, both what's in construction and what's planned in the future. The ABRT network is such an important part of our transit system, really provides that sort of a reliable, high-frequency transit option on some of our busiest corridors. It's also what really helped just demonstrate some resiliency through the pandemic. It's one of the things that kind of maintain ridership throughout. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do to build this system out. And if you look at that ABRT map that Katie had up earlier, you can see really what is becoming the map of a really connected system. I do really want to thank Katie and her staff. I think they've done an exceptional job, not just of planning of all of this, but engaging all of us with questions, doing things like doing the walking tours out in the 50th and France. Do communicate it to your whole team, because we know that they're to answer our questions. They're there to answer questions we get from constituents, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh,
Just,
Councilmember
and
Johnson.
again, as it relates to the C line, I mean, I know it's a long time off, but, we've got cities all along Highway 55 that are working already on potential BRT down the road. So, it's good to see the whole system being built out, and that, hopefully, I don't know if I'll be around on planet Earth by then, but, it's exciting, and I know Met Council staff, too, has been just so supportive of that effort, and it's really gaining steam. So I just, for the future projects that aren't out there yet, just seeing how it all coordinates and fits together, and to Councilmember Barber's point, it's really important for our region and all parts of our region, so thank you for your work on that, too.
Any other thoughts, questions? Chee.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say thanks for this presentation. We hear different, ABRT updates kind of piecemeal, so it's good to have a single presentation where we get a 30,000-foot view of all of the lines together. Excuse me. And I'm really excited for the whole system to go live and to work together, so thanks.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thanks, Chair. Just one comment and then one question. Just want to share your excitement for the H line. You think about from a St. Paul standpoint, connecting people to amenities, and in St. Paul, Lake Phelan, and Lake Como, especially just such regional assets, and to have a east-west connection to both of those parks and lakes, I think is really exciting. And then just one question I had was related to the temporary stops on Portland. How do those temporary stops compare to the what will be a permanent stop in the future? Are they the same or different?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fredson, I'm really happy that I have this slide as the very last one. The temporary stops that we deployed on Olson Highway in advance of C line opening are very similar to what we are planning for those temporary stops now on Park and Portland at 38th Street. So a standard shelter, a lot of things that are bolted down and can be lifted up in the future rather than things that make more permanent investment into the ground. So we're working right now with the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County to review plans for exactly where we need to pour concrete, but really trying to minimize that so that we have an investment that's largely movable and can respond to changing conditions in the future.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question about the future plans for the Sea Line in coordinating with MnDOT. I know that there's an interest in making that corridor safer. Can you speak a little bit about the changes that we want to coordinate with that MnDOT is planning?
Mr. Chair, council member, that is a good question and one that right now I know MnDOT is working to further develop. I think one of the key things that we are seeking to do is establish that we would be making permanent investments in stations so that as the visioning process that MnDOT is leading becomes more clearly defined as a project, we can best fit into that. I think what we do know is that we would not seek to make improvements to stations on Olson Highway prior to a MnDOT project, knowing that there would likely be changes that would potentially move curbs or do other things that would change the way we would want those stations to fit into the future condition. I don't have much more of an update at this point on MnDOT's process, but I think that is something we could bring an update to Transportation Committee as we bring this forward later this year.
That's great, thank you.
Other thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
Just a quick comment, because I work at just around the corner from the Emerson on Broadway news station, and it makes such a difference, the new bus shelter compared to the fish tank shelters that we have before. It's amazing to see that how much that new design kind of enhances the neighborhood in addition to being functional. And just a quick comment, just looking at the cement pourings from the crews here. Great job in keeping away the cats from stepping on the wet cement. I know that's an issue in that neighborhood. So congratulations to the contractor. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember, I'll pass that on to construction staff. Thank you.
Anything else? I think Councilmember Johnson said, "in my lifetime," which resonates, because these projects normally take so long. But if you look at that map in the year 2030, that doesn't seem far away. And so we're doing a lot that is actually on the ground happening, I expect, in our lifetimes. So I actually think that this council and all the staff, and please extend our appreciation to your staff, Katie, because I think this is the future, and I think I've heard it said, and I hope it's true. I hear myself saying it, so I hope it's true. We're going to be world leading in the ABRT kind of network. And it's a network, not just a line. And I think that's kind of why we love, and I think you've said, seeing it, the whole of it really shows the power of what this system can be. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, I will definitely pass along to my staff, but I appreciate this council's leadership around Arterial BRT, and I'm just very pleased to be delivering this on behalf of the council.
Thank you. That ends our information presentation and the agenda. Are there any reports or things that any council members would like to share? Regional Administrator Bogie, anything?
Just a quick update that it's budget season here at the council, and you're hearing budgets in your committees now, and in October or August 10th, you'll hear the combined budget kind of all come together for a preliminary budget presentation on August 10th, and then on the 24th, we'll ask you to adopt the preliminary budget and the council's levies. So, look forward to strapping you in your chair and
get your eye shades out. Get your calculators ready. All right, good. General Counsel.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm actually going to violate my no reports on nice weather days rule. I have two things I would like to report today. First, I think many of you are aware of the litigation involving the 2040 Minneapolis plan. 3 organizations brought a challenge to the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan, saying that it violated the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act. The district court did make that finding that it violated MIRA and ordered some pretty significant injunctive relief against the city, including basically telling them that they had to go back to their 2030 plan. The city of Minneapolis has appealed that to the Minnesota Court of Appeals, and the Metropolitan Council is filing an amicus brief in that matter. We're actually filing it today, maybe at this very minute. We felt that it was very important that the court would hear more about the Metropolitan Land Planning Act and how the city of Minneapolis's plan fits in with all of the planning for the region, that you can't simply take a 2040 plan and go back to 2030 for one particular city when it's based upon the Metropolitan Council system plans. And we make a lot of other really salient points, I think, as well, but I did want you to be aware of it because the Metropolitan Council typically does not file amicus briefs in matters, but in this case, we felt that it was very important to support the city in its appeal and make sure that the court fully understood the ramifications of its order.
Do you want to describe just the recent kind of, it was an article in the paper, there's been a stay on that, from the judge that Minneapolis will continue to enforce the 2040 plan?
Yes, so the court had ordered an injunction against the city and had given them basically 60 days to comply. The city moved the district court, who had made that decision, for a stay of that order pending their appeal to the Court of Appeals, because it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for the city to try to revert to its 2030 plan if the Court of Appeals will ultimately reverse the plan. And yesterday, the district court did rule in the favor of the city and stayed the entry of that order, which is significant because you all have been passing a lot of business items that include LCA funding, for example, to the city of Minneapolis. And so now that we know that the city will continue to proceed with those projects while the appeal is pending.
And I'd like to think maybe that decision was in part informed by the information that we've shared about the impact, negative impact on some of what we're doing.
Yeah, I really have to give a shout out to Lisa Barajas and her team and Deputy General Counsel Dave Tyson. They've really jumped in short order and took a large amount of really complicated information and have distilled it down, I think, to pieces that can be understood by courts and others that don't necessarily enjoy or get into comprehensive planning the way we might.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Can I ask? Yeah, and thanks for that. We had a similar briefing in Management Committee today, so I appreciate the heads up on the filing of the amicus brief. And is that public document? Is that something that will be shared with council members?
Yes, we can provide a copy to you. It is a public document.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one other report today. We haven't really had an opportunity to do introductions for a while, but now that we're back in person, I have a bunch of them. Right before COVID hit, we hired an employment attorney, Meg Jaycott. She's sitting in the audience today, waving at you. Meg has a long history of employment law in the public sector, and I think was here for 2 weeks before we were all sent home. She was instrumental in navigating all the employment law issues that were raised by COVID and COVID policies, so we really appreciate that. One of the other things that Meg did when she came in was to look at how the council was handling data practice requests. We get more and more and more requests every year, and it's a huge job. At some state agencies and other places, they have a separate data practices office. And so Meg researched how other people were handling it and came up with kind of the business case for having our own data practices office here at the council that reports to the Office of General Counsel. We think that it will really help with transparency and with making sure that we're handling data practices requests efficiently, but also making sure that we're protecting private data of individuals and others. So on top of her other job, Meg took on that project, and we actually hired on March 14th, Catherine Olson, who is here with us today as well. Catherine is our new head of data practices. We stole her from the Minnesota Department of Education, where she did a very similar job. So she was the perfect candidate for the position. And not only that, on July 5th, we have Ms. Nisha West, who is sitting next to Catherine. Nisha has very extensive paralegal background handling electronic documents, e-discovery, and we hired her to start and work with Catherine to help work through these processes. We are in the process of developing a web portal so that people can make data practice requests through the web portal. There are other government entities that do that, and I think the public finds it to be a really easy way to make data requests. So just an absolute lot of work that's been going on around that. And finally, also with us today, this is the third summer that the Metropolitan Council has participated in the Twin Cities Diversity in Practice Law Clerk Program. We are partnered up with the Lockridge Grindle Nowen firm, and they keep the law clerks for the first 10 weeks of the summer, and then we have them for the last 2 weeks of the summer. We are, I believe, the only government entity that participates in the program. And so with us here today is Miss Kira Lay, who is a University of Minnesota law student. She's finishing out her 2 weeks, Friday, sorry, I'm losing track of time here. We have really been taking the opportunity to cram her head full of as much public sector practice as we can in those 2 weeks, but also I think one of the important things is she now has those public sector connections to help mentor her as she proceeds through her legal career, and we've really enjoyed having her, and I think it's a great program and something that we enjoy doing. So that's all I have.
That's a lot. Great. Thank you, Ann. And Kira, this is the last part of the summer. How sad, but we're great to have you with us. And Meg and Catherine, Nisha, welcome. Great for us to meet you in person. This is great organization and news that you're with us. Is there any other business? I think our general counsel's described this as a really nice day, so we'll go out and enjoy it. If there's no other business, this meeting is adjourned.